President Biden hosted the leaders of Finland and Sweden at the White House today after both Nordic countries formally applied for NATO membership. CBS's Natalie Brand reports from the White House.
President Biden called it a momentous day, telling the leaders of Finland and Sweden they have the full backing of the U.S. a day after the countries applied for NATO membership.
Having two new NATO members in the high north will enhance the security of our alliance and deepen our security cooperation across the board.
Finland, which shares an 800-mile-long border with Russia, and Sweden have historically remained neutral. But public sentiment in the countries has changed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
After 200 years of military non-alignment, Sweden has chosen a new path.
Joining the defense alliance requires unanimous approval from current members, but Turkey has voiced opposition.
We are open to discussing all the concerns Turkey may have.
3 weeks after President Biden's initial request for additional military and humanitarian aid for Ukraine, the U.S. Senate has passed a nearly $40 billion package.
But 11 Republicans, including Kentucky's Rand Paul, who held up the vote for a week, opposed the measure.
There is no free lunch. $40 billion cannot be created out of thin air.
It appears more and more MAGA Republicans are on the same soft-on-Putin playbook that we saw used by former President Trump.
Lawmakers also welcomed the leaders of Finland and Sweden to Capitol Hill. Senate leaders say they will work swiftly in their role to assist U.S. approval of their NATO application. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
Ratifying their admission to NATO.
CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan joins us now. Margaret, thank you. The president met with the leaders of Finland and Sweden today at the White House, both of which want to join NATO. But Turkey, which is also a member, opposes the move. Why is that?
Well, Ankara, the capital of Turkey, is really just looking to try to maximize the political leverage they have right now in the diplomatic space. And that is Turkey is saying they won't stand in alignment with all the other NATO members, and unanimous consent is required to allow in Finland and Sweden. But the projections from the White House is that they can get this done, that they can persuade Turkey. Turkey specifically is looking for Sweden to adjust its foreign policy to be more in line with what Turkey wants. And this has to do with a very narrow issue in regard to Kurdish separatists, which Turkey has had a lot of domestic political issues with and has labeled some of those breakaway groups as terrorists. So when you hear Turkey throwing around the words security threat and terrorism, that's what they're referring to. But this is an obstacle that the White House is definitely focused on just getting past fairly quickly.
Margaret, for the first time in 3 years, the United States now has an ambassador to Ukraine. Bridget Brink was confirmed last night. With President Biden now being in office for a year and a half, what took so long for this to happen?
This is one of those big diplomatic mysteries, Bob. I mean, I've talked to so many top diplomats who are very invested in the region and just say it befuddles them. Yes, the Ukrainians took a bit of a long time to grant permission, agrément, once they were asked for it. But that wasn't the holdup. It wasn't Kyiv greenlighting this very well-known diplomat who is a career foreign service officer. It was just not deciding to go ahead with the nomination, even though Bridget Brink had been the selectee and the front runner for a year. So it is very much a mystery as to why the president waited to pull the trigger on formally saying Bridget Brink was going to be his envoy in the capital of Ukraine. But now she is going to be greenlit. But of course, in perspective here, Bob, this is such a loaded issue. There hasn't been a U.S. ambassador, a Senate-approved U.S. ambassador in 3 years since Masha Yovanovitch, the former ambassador, was pulled out of post, which you remember became a big part of that first impeachment trial for President Trump. But then once President Biden took office, he didn't quickly appoint someone. And there's always been questions about whether there was concerns about what would come out in some kind of hearing if it became very much politically loaded with trying to rehash the impeachment. Of course, there was a war now, very active, hot one, and that kind of pushed aside all those matters and very much made the focus just about the work Bridget Brink would be doing. And she will be soon in Ukraine after she presents her credentials to the Zelensky government and is accepted, which she is expected to be.
Margaret, the president is now on his way to Asia with stops planned in Japan and South Korea. What's his hope here on this trip? What does he want to achieve?
President Biden wants to show that he is not pulled to the side and distracted by Vladimir Putin's troublemaking in Ukraine and threat to the Western alliance. Rather, he wants to show the confidence that he has shored it up with all the billions of dollars of aid that was signed off on today, with the fact the U.S. has raised the American flag in Kyiv once again. You know, this is saying the Battle of Kyiv has been won. We know it's a grinding war in the East. We're not going to be distracted by Russia. We're going to turn towards that strategic adversary of the United States, China. And Beijing is really the area that the Biden administration wants to focus on in terms of competition on so many different fronts. And we just talked about delays in decision making when it came to Ukraine. When it comes to China, we still have not had a formal China policy unveiled by the Biden administration. And admittedly, U.S. officials will say they've been adjusting things since the war in Ukraine because they are still trying to assess fully how interlinked Beijing and Moscow actually are. They're trying to assess the economic damage in China due to their COVID lockdowns. They have that zero COVID policy, a real estate bubble there. There are some very interesting things happening within China right now that raise questions about just how strong it may be and how it's positioning itself. And so the Biden administration is also taking some time here to figure out if they want to take significant moves, like lifting, for example, tariffs off of Beijing. Those trade tariffs that have been left on, they were put on by the Trump administration. They are adding to the price of some goods. The Treasury Secretary told me as much back in November that they are another factor in some price inflation, at least. So there are a lot of different moving parts. And so this is really kind of kicking off the Biden administration saying we are refocusing on Asia. And they're doing so with holding this meeting of the so-called Quad, these leaders from Australia and India and the United States and Japan together to say we in the Pacific are going to stand up in opposition to Beijing if it tries to encroach further on territories in the Pacific.
Margaret Brennan, thank you so much. And a reminder, Face the Nation streams every Sunday at 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS News.